Now that we've seen how to set up static sprites using the same sprite sheet, here this little frog sprite sheet we had set up, let's look at how to animate this little fly character. He's just got 2 frames. We're going to go back and forth between the 2 frames. It's going to be a nice simple little animation, and that'll be enough to show that a fly is flying along. So first I'm going to use Playmaker to flop his little animation back and forth, and then I am going to put him in motion, again using Playmaker. So let's take a peek. I will start with this poly 1x1 Z forward that I made in the last video, and I've got a copy of the previous scene, so the camera is still set up in the same way, pointing straight down, and everything should work same as it did before. So easy breezy. Now let's apply our same texture. We don't want to use the same material, right? Because if I apply this frog sprite sheet, I get the texture I want, but what I want to do is use offset and tiling here in order to, well, actually, let me make another one of these just so I can show you what's going on. Pull that out a little bit and let's kind of set them up side by side there. Okay, so if I use the same material that I was using on all the lily pads, and it's just got a UV mapped over it, and what I want to do is start animating this texture offset in order to get the animation flowing, I'm going to have to adjust things like the tiling, and look, it changes everything because we're working at a material level, not just an instance level. It means we're not just editing this, we're editing the material, and the material reapplies whatever changes you make to everything that uses it. So we aren't going to be able to use the same material, but we are going to be able to use the same texture. So let me just go ahead and create a new material. And just because that's off the screen, I'll show you. It's create material. Okay, just doing it here so it ends up in the folder I want. And let's call this fly matte. Sounds pretty good. I can apply the same texture, because remember the texture is just what it is. I'm just going to use this part of it. So let's go ahead and talk about tiling and offset. So on this fly material, let's call him fly just before we lose track of it. There we go. On this material, I need to adjust the tiling to only show this little fly image. And you know how tiling works. If you had like wood or cement or something and you wanted to tile a texture, you could use it lots and lots of times. Let me put, there we go. I didn't have the right material on. So I can adjust this material. And see, if I tile it once, that means just show it once. If I tile it twice, that means show it 2 times. So it's 2 vertically and 2 horizontally, or vice versa. You know, 4 is 4 times. So this is how you set up tiling textures, something you're probably pretty used to by now. We're going to go in the other direction because I only want to show a quarter of the whole thing. Because remember, we're going from 0 to 1, right? I only want to see a quarter of this. That's what will give me that chunk. So I can set my tiling, because 1 divided by 4 is 0.25. You can already see I'm down to 1 column. And here, I'm down to 1 row. The problem is it's pure black, which means it's one of these rows and columns down here somewhere. And that's what we use the offset for, is to kind of, you know, we're only showing a little tiny square. Actually, it's this little square in a corner. Let me blow this up so I can explain it more. We're actually only showing this little corner square. And UVs are going to work, you know, from 0 to 1 this direction, and textures are going to think 0 to 1 that way. So you kind of need to flip the numbers a little bit as you do your offset. So right now we're offsetting 0 to 0 on our fly material, which means we're showing just this little square. And I know I want to move it up, right? So if I offset, let's start with the Y so I can get up to this frame. If I offset it by 0.25, I've actually moved up 1/4. And we're still seeing black, which we'd expect. So if I move it by 0.5, see, there's our fly, because now I've nudged it up. 0.5 is half the way up. And if I wanted to see that green lily pad, I'd just nudge it by 0.75. See, we're just offsetting up and down. Now to go in, I would just simply, I want to go in a quarter, so that'd be 0.25. So if I want to see the fly frame with the straight wings, once again, I got the little wings back and the wings more straight. If I want to see that, I could just offset by 0.25 in the X. Whoops, if I can select it. And there's the different frame. So we're going to use Unity to literally scrub back and forth between these two little offsets. And that's how we're going to show the animation. And you notice the whole time we've been doing that this lily pad hasn't changed. Same texture, different material. So that's why it's important to, you can have a bunch of static objects share the same material. In this instance, your animated characters are going to need to have their own materials. And so now we know what the offset's going to be for those numbers. So we can plug those in. Let's go ahead and set an unlit transparent shader to punch that out. So we see him with his transparency. And the last thing we need to set up here is his direction. Some of you may have noticed this. Remember, we talked about Unity having the concept of Z being forward and Y being up. Now, up doesn't really work because we're, for us right now, it doesn't matter because we're doing top-down 2D. But forward really matters because if I tell Unity in code to move forward, this little fly, it's going to go to the right as far as he looks to us. And that's not what we want at all. So, you could rotate him and you could do all kinds of weird offsets and run into, maybe make it work, maybe run into issues, but it's just much easier to rotate his texture. Like, go for the easy solution as often as possible. And I've got him set up facing left. So let's just go ahead and change him on the sprite sheet really fast. And if I bring up these textures again, which I got from VickyWenderlich.com, some great free art. You can go download these assets and more if you'd like to experiment and follow along on your own. Much thanks for these assets. I have taken the originals from this Frog's Lily Pads game collection that she's got, and I have normalized them out to right here. I've got two little fly sprite sheets that I will pop open in my Pixelmator app. You can do this in Photoshop, whatever. All we need to do is rotate these two little images. So I'm just going to choose rotate canvas 90 degrees to the right. Nice and easy. And save back out over top of itself. Again, rotate canvas 90 degrees to the right. Nothing fancy. Man, if you can do it cheap and easy, do it. It's great. All right, so that's taken care of. And let's open up. Remember, I called it Tower Test Sheet, and I don't know why, but I did. So let's pop this open. And notice how they flipped right away? Because these images are being referenced in. All right, this lily pad, green, orange, the fly, all that. They're just referencing these art assets right here. They're not actually imported or baked in, which is pretty neat. So if you do things like this, because you will, you'll want to edit these, and maybe you just start out with some simple, when you're making your own, you might start out with just simple shapes in order to get the animation going and start working on the gameplay, and then later your artists build it up. Whatever it is, you're probably going to want to edit this a lot. And if we look at the old sprite sheet, it's still baked in this way because that's the export. So all we need to do, I'll just save for good measure, and then republish. Nice and quick. And now, if we look at that sheet, look at that. Now they're facing up. So everything's the way I want. Okay, so I'm just going to delete this old sprite sheet. And I know I have to do a little swappery, but that's okay. So I'm going to copy the name. So it seemed to make sense. I'm just going to delete it from right there. It says, are you sure? Because things are using it. Yeah, that's fine. I'll bring in this test Tower Test Sheet. I'll rename it to what the old one was. And quickly, I know that was 512 by 512, so I'll just reset that really quick. And then here on my fly, I can just reassign that and see now he's facing the right way. And for good measure, well, it looks like the lily pad's picking him up because I renamed him. So that's good. Unity did a little nice update for me there. So, oh, well, maybe not that frog sprite sheet. Okay, so there we go. Now we've got him. If anything's broken or missing, you can just drag and drop them on. So now I've got my fly facing in the right direction, doing what I want. Scoot this guy out a little bit more. And now we just need to animate it. So let's go ahead and set up that FSM. First, I will make sure I have the fly selected. And the poly underscore 1x1 is the part of the object that actually has the animation on it. So I'll just add the FSM here. You could do it up here too and have just point to this object, but I want to have another FSM up here for movement. So I'll just go ahead and add that here. And let me make this a little smaller. So we can still see the fly, but I get a little bit more room to work. And I will add a new FSM. And let's go ahead and make it a nice little blue. And I don't need an idle state because I'm not going to turn the animation on and off. I'm just going to have the wings flap constantly because he's a little fly and that's what I want. He just never quite stops flapping. So I'll call this anim position 1, just good enough name. And let's put finish transition for when we're done. And in here, we're going to use texture offset. A set texture offset. And it's set to use owner by default, which is great because, once again, we're on the thing. Material index and named texture just point to the default material. If you have something with multiple materials, you're changing the name, then this is where you'd use these. But otherwise, you don't have to worry about it. Now, offset X and Y, these two parameters right here, are exactly the same as this offset right here, X and Y. We are specifically telling from this FSM, we're specifically telling Unity to change the value of this right here. So we know to get this first little fly animation, right, we need a 0 and a 0.5. So we can leave that at 0. We can leave this at a 0.5. Looks great. And then if we want to just kind of set that and wait for a second, let's just use wait. And I'll do, say, half a second so we can see it moving. I think the finished event will probably be fine. Then let me copy and paste this. So do I want to replace the start state? No, I do not. This will be anim position 2. And this time we know, right, because if we look at our fly material, if we index in by 0.25, that gives us the other frame. So I will reset this. We know we still need it at 0.5 in the Y because we're not changing the row. We just need to change the column. So now I will specifically tell it to go to this spot and then wait for half a second. And if I wire these two together, just really pretty basic stuff here, and I press play, make sure we're not maximized, then we should see a little guy flap his wings every half a second. And there we go. So pretty neat, right? We can then, let's just make a variable here. I'll make a float and call it anim speed. And now I'll set this to, let's say, like 0.2 of a second. And now here, instead of this value, I'll just use anim speed in both of these. And then if I want to tune it, which I will, then I don't have to do it over and over in each frame. And this gets bigger if you have like 8 frames of animation. It gets kind of ridiculous. So now I can just use this one variable. Let's take a look at it flapping faster. There he is going a little bit faster. So this is just a matter of taste, you know, how you want it to look. Actually, I'll do it just a touch faster. 0.1. There he is. Now he's flapping away, doing his little 2 animations. And we're just moving that texture offset back and forth. That's all it takes. Now, if I want to make this little guy move, let's go back. And again, I'm really playing loose with the camera right now, so I can just show you things at full size. Let's make it, say, like value of 4 so that it's a little bit larger. I'll scroll out here, make sure my fly is selected, and move him down. Say I wanted to make him move, I wanted to have him cruise from the bottom to the top. I can add, if I unlock that, I can add a new FSM right here. Add a color again. And I'll just call this move. So that's what we're going to do. Translate. This is the basic kind of movement. And scrolling up, so let's just pop that open. I know I want to move in the positive Z because we've determined that is what forward is. We just set a value of 1. I don't really know. That's probably a good one to start at. So it's just going to come alive and start moving forward down the Z vector. So let's take a peek and see if that does it for us. So now my guy's flying, right? All I'm doing is playing 2 frames of animation and doing a simple translation down the line. So that is how you can animate nice and simply and quickly. You can get a little animated sprite moving around in your game. Okay, so this probably isn't really totally enough. I think we want to do just a little bit more because you're probably going to want your sprite to like interact with other things, you know. As he is right now, he's pretty much just decorative. So I could instead take advantage of that space. Let me, I'm going to go ahead and turn off that gizmo so I can see him better. I'm going to add a cube. I'm going to make sure both of these things are at world 0. There we go. And of course, zoom back over to where it is. And I'll change this to be wireframe for just a second. So here's my little fly, the little, you know, the little polygon that I'm displaying it on, but I'm going to use this cube to make some collision geometry. And we're going to go ahead and, you know, you still work in 3D, but there it is. Let's bump this down just a touch so I can see the texture. And I don't need necessarily a full collision over this guy because we're doing, you know, we're just doing kind of fast and loose animation here with one big polygon. So you can just kind of choose how you want, you know, the collision. Do you want it to be that big? Do you want it a little smaller? And his wings do get larger as you go, but I think I'd make it sort of like, I'm not going to worry about his wings. I'm just going to do collision around the bulk of his body here. That's pretty much all I really care about. And then I'll pull this, well, actually I can just set it back to 0, like that. So now I've got collision around there. So his wings aren't going to have collision, but I'm okay with that. I'm not doing anything specific around that. And I will rename the cube to be fly, because this is actually going to be the parent now. It's got a box collider. Let me add a component physics rigid body. I will turn off gravity, because otherwise it's just going to fall. I don't want my fly to be falling and splatting. And I'm going to look under constraints. And here's a thing where I don't want it to move in the Y position. Okay, I don't want it to go up and down. So I will just go ahead and freeze its position there. I do want it to move in the X and the Z. So I'll leave that alone. And a constraint just locks it so that physics can't push it around in these things. And as far as rotation, I don't want any rotation around the X or the Z. I only want it around the Y. So I'm just going to constrain those. And now physics, if it interacts with anything, could only ever make it move on planes that keep it looking 2D. Okay? I can turn off the mesh renderer. I'm not going to get rid of it just because, see, it's gone now and I can't see it. So if I ever need to go back and edit it, I can just turn that on and scale it and do what I need. So I like to just leave that on while I'm working. But there it is. That's now the parent. I'm going to copy this. I am going to come over here and remove that component because I don't want to move this guy anymore. I actually want to move it right here. So let me pull up a little bit, capturing it a small for a 1280 by 720. It's not a lot of working space, so everything's kind of jammed here. I'm just going to move by copy pasting that whole move script right there. So I'm moving the parent object, not the child, and then I will just drop that in and attach it. So now I have a fly object with a physics collision. I can do all kinds of interesting stuff with it now. I can have it work with triggers and all that. And if we let's pull down a little bit and make sure we're maximized on play, and we can still watch our fly cruise around. Still works. But the difference now is, if I come back into my scene, I can set something up to where, see, I'm going to need both windows again. I'm going to start doing a little bit of like gameplay sort of thing here. Now that it's a physics guy, let me pull back off so I can see him. See, like he's right over here. I'm going to move him just off screen. Let's see what that is. -5 looks pretty good. Just square up that number. So -5, and I'm going to bet +5 gets him off the screen in the other direction. Yeah, so that works. So that's going to be my range of motion. I'm going to have this little dude start at -5. And then I'm going to make a just a quick, simple trigger. Square that up, move it so it's just going to be, I'll scale it while it's still on the screen so I can see relative to the thing. I'll move it right off screen, right like that, which is at 6, so that's about where we were expecting. Okay, make sure that's, I think there's plenty of space, but I'll just, to make sure I'll bump that up. We're going to turn this into a trigger. I'm going to turn off its mesh renderer. Well, I'm going to leave the mesh renderer on for now so we can just see it as we play, but I'd turn that off. So it is a collider now. And let's rename this. I'll use T for trigger so it sorts them all together for me. Let's call it fly move. And I'm going to add a new FSM. And what this is going to do is, actually I want that to be the idle state. Yeah, I cannot type right now. We're going to have a trigger on this. So trigger event, need a variable that's a game object. So we can store who collided with us. We're going to save that right there. And we just need to set up an event to take us to a new FSM. And nice and simple. Just have it loop back because we're going to have it take one action. So that will call the collided event. Over here we are going to turn off my preview, do a set position. The game object, we're going to use the collider, the thing that hit the trigger. And we want to move it in Z space world to -5, we decided was the starting position. So now, if our fly cruises by, and I'll go ahead and leave this, both the game and the scene window running. So now if we run, well, I guess I won't. We'll let the fly go by, and then he should hit that trigger, and we'll reset his position to the back, so we'll see him come flying through again. And there you go. So he'll just repeat that. And of course, you can make it much smarter. You can have triggers that send him moving in different directions. You could randomly move him around. You could do whatever you want. But he is now a fully functioning little game object with an animation on it. You can do whatever you want in your game with it. Now for the fly, we used 2 frames of animation and went back and forth. If you want to do something bigger with more frames of animation, it's the same process, you just iterate through more frames. Let me show you how that's done with a good old explosion, because everybody likes an explosion. So I'm going to bring in my old friend the polygon here, the 1x1 Z forward that I made in an earlier video. And I'll use it again for this. I will need a new material. So I'll just go ahead and create one of those, new material. And I will call this explosion underscore mat. And I can apply that right now to my polygon. And I don't have any explosions on my frog sprite sheet. Right? Remember the old frog sprite sheet I've got here? So I have room for stuff, but I'm actually going to make a whole new one. And I'll just show you how fast this goes now that we know what we're doing. So I will need texture packer again. Let me open that really quick. I've still got that old sheet in there, so I'll just make a new one that clears it out. Let me bring up more of these great free textures I got at vickywunderlich.com. Again, you can download these. It's the I'm going to use art out of the Tower Defense Art 2 collection, which you can find there and download for free if you'd like to try these examples yourself. And what I've done, I've normalized a lot of these sprites to 128 by 128 at 72 dpi, and I'm going to use a bunch of them. And here are, let's see, I think we can throw that one in. That'll be good. And the explosion, here's my stuff. So I'll throw those frames in. You can see it building the sprite sheet down here as I go. I don't need filler, I don't need the frog. I want my little tank, because we'll be using that in a later example. And here's some, not the towers, this is the one I want, the towers. So I've got a whole bunch of towers in here from this collection. There's 3 different towers of 8 frames each. There's a whole bunch of neat stuff. And I think that'll do it for now. Let me get that out of the way. And let's come down and adjust this map. First of all, remember, Unity 3D. PNG will be a fine output. I want this one to be 1024 by 1024. I'm going to force the size. Power of 2 is indeed what I want. And I want, again, I want them to go by names so I can organize them out in that way. I don't want padding because rather than a really highly optimized, I'm making something really highly regular. I do not want to allow rotation. I don't want them trimmed. And there we go. Now I'm getting this nice regular layout. You can see I've got 5 frames of an explosion right here. That's going to be really cool. I've got 8 frames of, look at that out of the way, 8 frames of a tank, 8 frames of these 3 towers, and here's another little alien. And that'll work out fine. So I think that's all I need for right now. Let me go ahead and save that sheet. And we'll save it into the same spot that I used before. This time I'll call it Tower Sprite Sheet. Seems to make a little more sense. And I will publish. Okay. And I come up and look. Tower Sprite Sheet. And now it's going off the screen, but let me see if I can shrink it up there. There we go. So it's going off the screen because it's 1024 by 1024, and I'm only capturing it 1280 by 720, so there's not enough room. But that is, that right there is the whole sprite sheet. It's that fast to throw one together when you need one. So let me go back to Unity at this point. I will drag in that tower sprite sheet. There we go. Tower sprite sheet. Looks good. We'll go with that for now. And where was my explosion? We'll apply that. We'll make that a unlit transparent. And now I just need to focus in on this row. So you remember what we did before. We made this, well, last time it was 4 columns and 4 rows, so it was 0.25. This time it's 8. So that will be 8 divided by, or sorry, 1 divided by 8 is 1.25 in order to get us a 1 by 1 layout. And I need to offset, where does, let's see, 0.5 gets me up to that tower. So I don't need it quite that much. 0.25 is not quite, so I need the one in between, right? So that would be 0.375 gets me right to that first frame of the explosion. So now I've found the column. And once again, let me just pull that up so you can see and shrink it. There we go. So I'm coming in, well, I've got 4 down, 2 here, and then there's 2 empty ones down there. So I needed to iterate up to this one. And that's how we go. 0.5 got us halfway to the middle, which was that one, not quite enough. So that's the frame I want. Okay? So we're good there. And explosion material. There we go. And now if I iterate at 1.25, just start stepping in, I get the different frames, right? And then 125, well, sorry, 25, and so on down the line, 375. I'm getting the different frames of this animation as I go in that direction. So I will start here and iterate in. Now let's set that up in Playmaker. See how we go about that. We can go ahead and just put it up here. There we go. Okay, now I'm set. Do that. We're going to, let's see, what we want to do first is we're going to have a texture offset. So set texture offset, and we decided that we needed 0 and 0.375. Let's copy that out. Come right back in. 0 is fine, and 0.375 for the X offset. And then I want to cycle through this, right? I want to automatically step through. I don't want to manually do it like I did before with the frames. So let me show you another way to do that. Here I'm going to do a float add. I'll put that underneath. So first we're going to set the texture, and then I'm going to need a float variable. So let's just go ahead and say anim position. That'll be good. So we will assign X offset here to anim position. And by default, it's going to be 0 when we start. But here, right after we set it, I'm going to add 0.125. So that'll move it in 1 notch. right? Moving in 1/8. We're just going to do it once. We don't need to run it every frame or anything. And then from here, we're going to flow out to a finished state. So we're going to say set anim position is what we're doing. Add another state. We'll make that yellow. And we'll call this wait. And I'll add, bet you can guess, a wait. And let's just call that, like, say, well, 0.5 again, so we can really see what's going on. Hook those together. And again, we're just going to wait this one time now. And I think the finished state will probably work. Let's do that. Finished. We're not doing anything special there. So let's play. Oh, here's something very important. I forgot to specify that I'm playing the animation on this object, which is where the texture is. It's not actually on this part of the object. It's on the child and not the parent. So let's go ahead and run that. And what you see is the animation playing. Well, I'm going all the way through. See? So it's doing the right thing. And you notice I'm getting the animation frames, but I'm also getting these guys at the end, these three. So let me, let's look at that sprite sheet again really quick, just so we're clear on what's going on. Right here, I play through these, but then I've got 3 more at the end. So I want to stop that count up right here. Right? I want to stop that count up right here and then reset it to 0. So that's, let's see, 1, 2, well, we're at 0. So 1, 2, 3, 4 times we need to iterate in. So let's go ahead and get rid of that and go back to our FSM. Da-da-da. And we need to do a little bit of a check here. So instead of the wait, well, actually, let's put a check in the middle. That seems to make good sense. And we will do a position check, we'll call it. And I'll make that another color. So now the finished will flow into the position check instead of the wait state. Okay, the wait will still come back up here when it's done. And off of that, we are going to have cycle animation for an option, and another one will be, which I'll use here in a minute, which will be end animation. And we can put those as 2 states off of this. So cycle and end. And right now I'm just going to use cycle, hook it up to the wait state. And in here, we want to do a float compare. And I will check anim position against a float number right here. So we said we wanted to go in 5 or 4 steps, which would give us the 5th icon, or the 5th little image, because remember we start at 0. So 4 would be halfway in on 8, a grid of 8. So let's put 0.5, and I think that'll get us there. So if anim position equals 0.5, then what we're going to do is end, right? That's what we would normally do. Or reset, that sort of a thing. If we want to loop, let's put our state in here, and first we'll call it loop. And so end the animation. So if these equal the same thing, we're going to go to the end animation because we're at the end of that animation. If it's less than, we're going to cycle the animation and keep going. And if I always just select this too, just in case there's a float error or a bug or something some weird thing happens, it's just a good slop factor that catches it for you, which is good. So we just check once. I'm going to come into loop, and here I will do a set float value, and we're going to take that anim position and set it back to 0. All right, and on finished. When that's done, then we go into the wait state because we want to just keep on going, and that can be yellow too. Well, I'll make it different so that we see different things are going on in each stage. All right, so look over this again one more time, and then we'll look at it. So we set the texture position. We're using this as a dynamic number. Then we add up 0.25 to that, which will step it in by one position in our sprite sheet. Then we check to see if we're at, oh, I see a bug already, I need to advance this one more because we're actually going to advance past that. So I think that would be 65. And what we can do from there is, so we check in, see if we're at the end of our animation, and if we are, we reset it to 0, and if we're not, we go ahead and flow through. So let's see if I got this right and have any other bugs hidden away. Now we're seeing our animation play, and then it loops, and it restarts. So there we're getting only the animation frames that we want. Okay? And with that done, we're really tuning the animation time based on this wait state. Yeah, there we go. So if I set this to, let's say, 0.1, that should be pretty good. Now if I watch, now it's playing much smoother and faster. So you can tune that to be whatever you'd like. And I think that's good for me. Another thing we can do, instead of resetting the float value here, is at the end of the animation we could just do a, we could turn it off or move it off screen or something. I'll just put a destroy object on there. Well, actually, let's do destroy self. That's much easier. So remove that. So we'll just have it destroy itself when it's done. So let's take a look at that. So the animation plays once and goes away. And that right there is really something you see even in 3D games, in consoles and PCs and stuff. You'll see a sprite explosion go off or a special effect of some kind of particle nature. There it is. You saw it happen. And that's the same thing you do if you I don't know, break a barrel in a game, or something lands and splats or creates a dust puff. You can run that again just off this one little polygon and have a setup like this. You can loop through, you can cycle, you can stop, you can do anything you want. So there's the fly example where we manually set it each time and went back and forth. You could have several frames of that. And here's another example where we just kind of mathematically iterate through something and play it as a big run with just 3 or 4 easy states. And there is sprite animation, quick and easy in Playmaker and Unity 3D.